So, this morning I've been looking a lot into, I watched this documentary, and I'm going to try to put links to everything inside of the details for this post, about, well, first I guess I have to explain that I had always been attracted to the teachings and who Jesus was. Now, I was never really attracted to Christianity. There's a unique story behind that, but let's just say that Christianity at face value disappointed me in my youth. But the teachings of Jesus, and it really was, sort of Christians not doing what Jesus taught that sort of turned me away from Christianity. But I'd always been attracted to Jesus' teachings and who Jesus was, especially later in my college years, which were just recently. Interest in Jesus and who he was and what he taught, sort of what ended up leading me to Buddhism. It didn't lead me to Christianity. And now, I've been really looking, like this morning I spent some time on it. I still need to spend more time on it. But first let me be clear that I do not know if Jesus was taught Buddhism. There's no way for anyone to know. But having known Jesus' teachings and studying them, and now becoming a Buddhist, I definitely see a connection there, and it's unignorable for me. And so there are these stories, these old stories that Jesus, and I never drew a conclusion about whether or not I thought Jesus died on the cross or not. Again, that's another thing where nobody knows, but the way that the stories are told, especially in the Gospels, it seems like Jesus may have survived being crucified. Now, whether or not you believe that's actually somebody raising from the dead or not is sort of a personal decision. For me, if Jesus, if I am to believe Jesus was resurrected, it wasn't a resurrection in the sense of, he died and then his spirit came back into his body. Being Buddhist, I can't believe in that, and just my own personal common sense, I don't believe that Jesus was resurrected in the way. But he may have survived being crucified. And many people back in those days would see that as a resurrection, especially if he was stabbed in the side and, these things were done to him, and he still survived. I think that tells me more the belief in a resurrection, that Jesus did live on, that Jesus did survive. So where these stories come in is saying that Jesus, after he survived that horrific issue, lived on and moved somewhere else and went into hiding, because the Romans, of course, if they were to find out he was still alive, would definitely do something about it. But Jesus had already taught people. He had sent out missionaries. He had, the way I see it, sort of been let down very badly, having been turned over to the authorities it just gets me thinking. It just, why was Jesus such an enemy to Jews if he was teaching something that was Jewish? I think that he was teaching something that wasn't Jewish. Maybe he was teaching something of his own common sense that was a little less Jewish, or maybe he was taught it. He was taught Buddhism. There are manuscripts and stories about Jesus being taught Buddhism before he returned to Jerusalem when he was 29. His name was Isa there. Yusosaf, yeah. Maybe he did learn Buddhism, and that's where his teachings sort of were seeded from. I know what's taught is that he was God, and of course he taught this great teaching, but I think it is perfectly reasonable to think he was just a man, and he set out to be a religious teacher, somebody who helped people come back to God and who God was. And it's just very interesting to me, and I, of course, am not trying to develop any solid beliefs in certain things, but it just, it intrigues me that, growing up, I was always attracted to Jesus. As I matured, I wasn't attracted to Christianity. I held on to Jesus' own teachings, his own words, his own morality, structure. I held on to those things as I matured, and I found Buddhism, and there's such a strong relationship there in what I feel were good about Jesus' teachings, about his philosophy, about his way of life, that are very strong with Buddhism. And so I found a place, this. I say I'm a Buddhist, but I'm not entirely just Buddhist. I sort of belong to that area, but I'm definitely a Jesus follower. I'm definitely I'm definitely not necessarily a Christian. But I don't know. I like thinking that maybe Jesus did learn Buddhism. I read once in a Gnostic gospel, and these are gospels outside of what's in the Bible. And of course, to people who think that the Bible is the only truth, Gnostic gospels aren't going to be a very solid source. But for me, in these Gnostic gospels, it explains how and I'm not going to be able to remember exactly what Gnostic gospel it came out of, so don't absolutely trust me on this, but I had read that Jesus once told one of his disciples, maybe it was Judas, that if I tell you the truth, I speak to you in parables and things for you to understand for yourself right now, but if I were to tell you point blank the truth, you would turn me over and stone me for it, and in the end Judas ends up basically doing that. But he does tell Judas, and even Judas tells the other disciples, what did he tell you, what did he tell you? And he says, I can't tell you, or you would stone me for what I would tell you. And so he never ended up telling the other disciples what Jesus taught him or showed him. Ultimately, Judas was the one that ended up turning him over, maybe because he knew that truth. But I am a follower of Jesus, Jesus is a teacher of mine because of what he taught, what he told people to do. And I am a Buddhist because the Buddha taught what Jesus taught. course, there's a little more detail and there's a little more practice. But that's why I'm Buddhist, is because Jesus is one of my teachers. And Jesus, when I found Buddhism, I said, these are the same teachings. These are the same things. There's just more detail here. There's more structure. And people always, when I have these discussions with people, usually online, people say, well, Buddhists don't believe in God. That's not true. It's just looking at God more realistically. In fact, I challenge any Buddhist to tell me that the Dhamma, not the teachings of the Buddhists, but Dhamma, reality, ultimate truth, ultimate realness, isn't God, or should be how people who believe in God see God. It should be how they see God. It's the Dhamma. It's the ultimate reality that the Buddha was in touch with, was interested in seeing clearly. And I have a stronger relationship with Jesus now, and the idea that Jesus would not have gone on and said, just don't believe in God. He said you have to look at God correctly. I mean, isn't it interesting that Jesus doesn't spend a lot of time referring to Old Testament scripture? I mean, he mentions a couple of things. He mentions just a few things, but he's not following Old Testament, Judaism, Old Testament laws. He's not stoning people when they do things that are worthy of stoning. He's preaching forgiveness instead. He's not necessarily reflecting on the Old Testament the whole time. He's more reflecting on our human reality, our bad, our good, forgiveness. He isn't like, he doesn't, if Jesus was supposed to be God in the flesh on earth, he doesn't sound like God of the Old Testament, not getting mad at the people that follow him, disappointed in them, destroying them. He's teaching a whole different thing, and it just seems so nice to think that maybe Jesus did learn Buddhism, and that's what he was trying to teach the Israelites. And maybe that's why the Israelites got so pissed and tried to destroy him, because he was teaching something that wasn't Judaism. He was trying to tell Jews, there's, not become Buddhists, but there's more to this than what you're seeing. There's more to being human. There's more to having a relationship with God. There's more to it than just your Torah, your law, your way of life. I don't know. I'll try to put links to some of the stuff I'm looking at right now in the description. Why don't you give a look at it and let me know what you think.